talker. As he went out to the peninsula and back, he would talk about the history of the area and current events. After a little while, he noticed that people would get on his boat, ride it out to the Kitsap Peninsula, and then get right back on and ride back. He realized that was because he was such a talker, and they just wanted to hear about the area. So he made a career move, switched it from the Spring Street water taxi to Seattle Harbor Tours, and started the historic 1-hour harbor tour, which you are riding today. On the right-hand side of the vessel, as we pull out into the harbor, is the steamship. Turns out it was a pretty bad estimate, as there was over 2 tons of gold on board the ship. This got everybody super excited to go up to Alaska to make their fortune in gold. However, not a whole lot of people actually made their fortunes up in Alaska. Here in Seattle, however, it's supplies that they needed here in Seattle. A few notable companies that started in Seattle during that time: Nordstrom's shoe store, as well as the United Postal Service. The steamship Portland didn't actually go into the pier with the big white wheel. Between it and the next pier, the Seattle Aquarium, there was a large open spot where Pier 58 used to stand. However, given as it is no longer there, Pier 57 has adopted the title of Miners Landing. Speaking of the aquarium, it's the next pier down the water. It does not focus on training its animals, instead focus along with a treat, and she is now the world's only self-medicated otter. Up on the hillside, you can see a green building, some white trim across the window, lots of people standing on a expensive to live here. So Seattleites decided they would meet the producers, and on that first day, everyone who came was sold out within the hour. Since then, it has been the longest running open-air farmers market in the United States. It's also the site of Seattle's grossest tourist attraction, that being our gum wall. So if you want to leave a piece of yourself here in Seattle, chew a piece of gum and then stick it onto the wall. We're now passing the Norwegian Encore, very big cruise ship, one of the larger ones that comes through Seattle. It is sitting at the Bell Street Cruise Terminal. The Bell Street Cruise Terminal was Seattle's first cruise ship terminal. It was built in the year 2000. However, in that year that it was completed, there were exactly 0 ships to come to Norwegian Encore to ensure that they can keep up with all of the demand. If you're leaving on a cruise, some of them leave pretty early in the morning, so you might need to stay the night beforehand. Luckily, the next pier down the waterfront has a big red on top gray building. That is the Hotel Edgewater. The Edgewater was built for the 1962 World's Fair here in Seattle. 6 months long, millions and millions of people coming through the city. What better place than to stay right on the water? They wanted to make sure it was perfect, focused down, everything down to the last detail. But it turned out they focused on the details a little too much. It opened 2 weeks after the fair ended, meaning all that guaranteed revenue did not come in. They had to get a bit creative as to get people the bed sheets, the curtains, to Beatles fans, which gave them the money to save the hotel. And to this day, the Edgewater is known as Seattle's rock and roll hotel. We're now passing Pier 70, one of the oldest piers on the waterfront. Back during Prohibition, it was the point of the Liquor Control Board for Washington. It is now an Irish pub. Times has changed. We are now coming up on our closest and the most unobstructed view of the Space Needle. I highly encourage you to pull out your phones or your cameras and get this iconic shot of Seattle. When you're telling all of your friends about the great time you had in Seattle, showing them the pictures, the first thing that'll come to mind when they look at this picture, what's that red spiky thing at the bottom? It's a sculpture of one of our local animals. Above the beach, there is a globe with an eagle sitting on top, the word "the" sticking straight out of the globe. Around that globe are the words, "It's in the PI." that being the motto of Seattle's first newspaper, the Seattle Post-Intelligencer. That is the same newspaper that reported on the steamship Portland entering to kick off the Klondike Gold Rush. Queen Anne Hill. It was populated in the wake of the Great Seattle Fire. We had a furniture shop. It had a pot of glue that caught on fire. So what do you do with fire? You smother it with water, unless it's a liquid fire such as oil or glue that just spreads the flames. Ended up spreading upstairs where there was a distinct headquarters of Expedia.com. It was completed in 2020 to bring 10,000 new employees into the city. Well, until COVID hit, and now they're remote. We'll see how many come back after the pandemic is fully over. Expedia.com owns quite a few of the travel websites. Obviously, the one that shares its same name. Also, things like Hotels.com, Trivago. Basically, a lot of the companies which bundle your airfare with a hotel, bundling your trip together, a lot of those are done through Expedia.com, even if they don't carry the Expedia name directly. Another thing that we are well known for here in Seattle is our fish. Across the water from Expedia's headquarters is a tan building with the letter C followed by 175. That is one of our commercial fishing piers here in Seattle. Catch it, they would throw it back. That being because it would rot before they would ever get it back to port. So if they put it in the hold with the rest of the fish, then that would ruin their entire catch. There's no point to going out. However, that changed with the introduction of factory trawlers, those being ships that can catch the pollock and then process it right on board. Since then, the pollock industry has boomed. It goes into things like cat food, imitation crisp. Due to the angles, it looks much closer to the skyline than it actually is and looks like one of the more taller buildings in the skyline. Down into the left of the Space Needle is a building, looks like a pyramid with a green stripe running up one of the corners of it. That is Climate Pledge Arena, formerly known as Pier Arena. They look to the future. So they were focusing on more things and wanted a futuristic building to be the centerpiece of it. So they designed it so that it would look like a UFO landed on top of a pair of knitting needles. Hence its name, the Space Needle was born. Now at the point in 1962, at 605 feet tall, it was the tallest building in the skyline. So, naturally they wanted people to be able to enjoy this view, but, I mean, they have an observation deck one floor up, so they wanted to make it a bit more special. They put a restaurant in the bottom floor of the dish, over 1,000 feet tall. However, before they built it, they were still in the design phase. The FAA came to the owner of the building and was like, we have multiple major airports just to the south of the city. There's Boeing Field, in which all of Boeing's exports go out of, as well as Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, in which most of you probably flew into. And so to ensure that they didn't have to reroute all of the planes going into those two airports, they asked that the building not go over 1,000 feet. Named the city Seattle. Seattle to this day is the largest city in the United States named after a Native American. We can still see the ferry boat off to our right-hand side, a bit to the stern of us now. It's one of the Washington State ferries, and Seattle actually has the busiest ferry system in the United States. That is because of all of the islands that you can see out there. Combat vessel. We have a third ship moored up outside the Chosen, also a Ticonderoga class missile cruiser. So all three of these vessels belong to the U.S. Navy, one of Vigor Shipyard's primary customers. They also service the U.S. Coast Guard, as well as the Washington State Ferries, and a number of other private vessels. It's an extra added security measure while they have military ships being worked on there. So was it a good idea to pull a vessel? We can have our container ships moored here and then packed it up on top, creating the island. It briefly lost its title to Treasure Island down in Disneyland. Over time, it eroded down, whereas Harbor Island has naturally gotten larger, and so it briefly retook its crown as the largest man-made island, has once crossed the Pacific Ocean to wherever they need to go. Once there, they are moved off, carefully put on wheels so that they can move up and down the pier, and then sent to work. We are currently passing the Bolita, one of the container ship vessels that comes into the Seattle port. It's pretty full, you can tell, because there's a change in the paint, the blue and the red. The red line is the maximum fill line that the vessel can go up to. Wow. Typically they leave a few feet to make sure they don't get near that by weight. And you can see there is a few spots for containers. This ship is about 1,100 feet long, meaning that if you put it up as one of the buildings in the skyline, it would be the tallest building by about 100 feet. Looking up at the containers, they all look very, very similar. They're called universal shipping containers, and they're actually kept as a universal standard by the UN. There are only 3 sizes that you will see, those being 20 foot, 40 foot, and 45 foot. The extra 5 feet are for the refrigeration units. These were introduced in the 1960s. A trucker had the idea, why am I unloading my truck just for you guys to load it onto a boat? Why don't you just take the back of my truck and move it onto the vessel? Once his company started doing here. However, that's about 0.001% of all shipments that are sent. It's one of the safest ways for things to travel. However, there was a famous occurrence when a container broke free back in 1992. There's a ship making its way from Sydney that they could use these rubber duckies to track the ocean current. They came up with the serial numbers, created a hotline that then, if you found one, you could call said hotline, report where and when you found the rubber ducky, and thus created one of the studies that helped them find the giant trash island in the Pacific Ocean. At first, they found them where you would expect for things in the Pacific Ocean, all along the west coast of the United States, some down in Australia, Japan, China. So it's very good at breaking up the ice, going about 7 knots, similar to what we've been going for most of the tour. It can break up to 7 feet of ice. If it slows down, rides up on top of the ice, and uses its weight to crush down into it, it can break up to 20 feet of ice. There's a second icebreaker in there, number 11 Polar C. It has been mothballed, decommissioned. Most of its parts are used for its sister ship, the Polar Star, which is currently out away on mission. The 2 white vessels are known as cutters. They have also been decommissioned. They are the vessels that you'll want to see if you're breaking tackle after tackle after tackle. The Seattle fans got so rowdy that over at the University of Washington, they measured a 2.1 magnitude earthquake with its epicenter at CenturyLink Field. I know what you're thinking, that's baloney. Fans can't cause earthquakes by cheering for their team. Well, a couple years later, Beyonce came to town, went to CenturyLink Field, got the single ladies right into the building so that if Seattle ever caught fire again to save the building, they could just pull a pin and water would come down straight through the building. Since then, more modern firefighting techniques have been created, a more modern sprinkler system, and so they have emptied the water tower and the top of the... And as we are back there, I am not only your narrator, I am also your deckhand. So I will need to go down and tie up the boat so you can move along on the rest of your day in Seattle. You guys have been a great audience. Thank you for listening. I've been Daniel, signing off.